Good afternoon and welcome to the Town Hall sponsored by Penn State Today. Today we will be discussing the university's response to the novel coronavirus and focusing primarily on what this means for students. We held a similar town hall earlier today devoted to faculty and staff. As you can tell, we're doing things a little differently today as we've been implementing social distancing in our town halls. And we are hosting our first online-only town hall, streamed here at liveevents.psu.edu. You can email your questions to questions@psu.edu or submit them through the Google form on this website. We have received literally hundreds, if not thousands, of questions already, and we will get to as many of them as we can during this process. But if we do not get to your question, we will attempt to follow up in other forms online. Today we have with us University President Dr. Eric Barron, Executive Vice President and Provost Nick Jones, Associate Vice Provost for Online Programs, Renata Engel, Vice President for Student Affairs, Damon Sims, Associate Vice President and Senior Associate Dean for Undergrad Education, Yvonne Gadelius, and Associate Professor of Biology and Researcher with the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics at Penn State, Matthew Ferrari. First, President Dr. Barron would like to say a few words.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us in what I know is a very stressful time for everyone. I want you to know that the decisions that we're making as a university are really based on three foundations. First and foremost is the health and safety of our students, our staff, and our faculty. The second basic foundation is to get you across the finish line, to make sure that if you're poised to graduate, that we cross that boundary and we make sure that you can continue your education into the fall without this becoming a lost semester. And at the same time, for you to have those learning outcomes that help you be successful. And third, we have a focus on the financial well-being of our employees, including student employees. To address the element of teaching and that importance of getting you across the finish line, we recognize that this is really challenging. And we truly appreciate not only your patience, but the degree to which you're jumping in there and helping us make sure that this is successful. It's challenging to just flip that switch and all of a sudden have a community be focused on remote learning and remote education. We understand that that's a challenge, but I just want you to know we really are all hands on deck to make sure that we are delivering to you that education that you need. Now, I have some personal experience with this. Last week, I met my class at its regularly scheduled time. And I have to admit, I was really impressed by the extent to which the students in my class were thoughtful, were engaged, were participating in class, and how rich the discussion turned out to be. But there was one element that I really appreciated and gave me a little bit of pause, because one of the students said, by being here all together and being able to see each other, I get to know that my classmates are all right. And this takes us to this sense of community at Penn State, which is so incredibly important and that really defines Penn State. We are a community, and by having the classrooms and having those students be together, we contribute to the successful outcome of that course. We know there's a lot of information out there which indicates that if you're out there on your own, it's much harder to stay focused and complete your education. I also want to take a moment to address something that has emerged just literally in the last few minutes, and that's the announcement of the first COVID case on the University Park campus. So first of all, I want you to understand that the alert that occurred is one that is regulated by the federal government Department of Education, where they ask us to provide that alert for the first case. So we have done this alert as a direct requirement for the federal government. Second of all, I want you to know that our buildings are largely deserted, as most people are working from home and working remotely to make sure that they can deliver an education and keep the university functioning. So in that sense, the risk of transmission, community transmission, is limited. But still, our Office of the Physical Plant will step in and follow all the Department of Health guidelines to make sure that our buildings remain safe. So I just wanted to take a minute to address that specific issue. And finally, to say that this is really unprecedented. There's absolutely no way that something like a pandemic is not going to have significant impact on your university and on you. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate the many of you that are stepping in there and doing what it takes for you to get to the finish line on this semester. A lot of the things I see about what you're doing are truly remarkable, and I want to make sure that I start this town hall by thanking you for all of those efforts. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Barron. And as I said before, we have a member of our Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics here on with us today, joining via Zoom. And Dr. Matt Ferrari, we'd like to offer you a few minutes if you could give us some context to this novel coronavirus.
Sure. So my role here in the group has been to try and bring some real-time public health perspective to the university decision-making. I have a long background in global public health and in dealing with monitoring and response to outbreaks all around the world. And from a public health perspective, Penn State has really been trying to do the right things. We've required that students stay home from break to minimize community transmission here and keep everyone healthy. We've asked our employees to work from home as much as possible and provided them the infrastructure to do so. And we've canceled large and even small events all around campus. But importantly, really the university is working to provide students, staff, and the faculty with the information, the resources, and the infrastructure to comply with all of these distancing guidelines. It's important to note that this virus affects everyone in the community right now. A CDC report showed that 20% of people between the ages of 20 and 40 years still needed to be hospitalized with severe disease. So while COVID disease is less severe in younger individuals, which is a great thing, even a mild infection can still be transmitted onwards and put other people at risk. So it's incumbent upon all of us to take on the responsibility of preventing that risk, both to ourselves and to others. Now, this virus might be with us for some time. It's uncertain now, but at the moment, physical distancing and hygiene, these are the best tools that we have at our disposal. As a community, we're using those tools to try and buy time, to strengthen the systems that are currently keeping us healthy, and to develop both the novel systems and the therapeutics that are going to keep us healthy in the future.
Thank you very much. And Provost Jones, I understand that you would like to outline some of the steps that the university has taken so far to slow the spread of this virus.
Sure. Thanks very much, Ben. And first and foremost, I'd like to just echo and reiterate President Barron's comments, and in particular, the priorities that he articulated. First and foremost, and chief among them, of course, the safety and well-being of our Penn State community, our faculty, our staff, and of course, all of our students. Our primary mission over the last several weeks has been to, as President Barron indicated, to keep our students on track to meet their, whether it's graduation requirements or course requirements for the semester. Everyone has answered that call. Our faculty, the staff who support them, as well as you, of course, our students, who stepped up with very little warning and completely upended the way you learn at Penn State, from being in the classroom to learning in a remote environment. Just so you all know what you achieved on the first day of remote learning after spring break, Monday a week ago, at 10 a.m., we had 63,000 people participating in some 350 Zoom sessions, all doing synchronous instruction. That was just an amazing flip from our normal mode of operation, and you are all to be commended for that huge effort on your part. As we enter now, or in our second week of remote learning, we know that this is a major adjustment for everyone. We do believe that while there are some challenges associated with synchronous instruction, we believe for many reasons, including the ones President Barron articulated, that it is in the best interest of everyone, because being together during this difficult time as a learning community is just incredibly important for student success and students being able to help one another achieve their learning outcomes. President Barron leads an executive decision-making group that meets daily to make the best decisions possible about how to move the university forward. President Barron appointed me to charge a group of 12 task groups that are focused on covering all aspects of the university's coronavirus response. You can see them on your screen. I won't read them all here, but it gives you a sense of the scope of the work that is being undertaken by these groups. We know that you have a lot of questions. We're going to try to get through as many of them as we can in the 90 minutes we have this afternoon. But two things: we won't get to all of your questions, and second, we won't have all of the answers. Some of those answers are emerging as we speak, but this is an opportunity for us to share with you our thinking and the latest information that we have as we've focused on many of these important areas that were just listed. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you all very much for that introduction. I'd like to remind everyone that we are live streaming this at liveevents.psu.edu. We are also broadcasting this on the radio. You can find the call letters and the news story from this morning. And if we reference specific resources and websites throughout the time today, we will make sure that those are uploaded to the virus site that was also linked on this page. But for those of you paying attention, it is psu.edu/virusinfo. And I'd like to encourage you all to bookmark that site and visit it often. This is really the most up-to-date resource for every step the university is taking with regards to the novel coronavirus. I would like to thank you once again for submitting those questions. You can continue to do so at questions@psu.edu or through the Google form that is on this website. But as Provost Jones mentioned there, we have received many, many questions already, and we will get to as many of them as we can. Dr. Barron, we'll start with you. One of the questions we have received the most is, what is happening with May graduation?
So this is an important issue. If you add up everybody that would come into the Bryce Jordan Center during the May commencement, you're going to hit a number that's somewhere close to 45,000. So if we're thinking about social distancing, if we're thinking about making sure that a single or a group of people that have coronavirus are not spreading it to literally hundreds and hundreds of people, it makes an in-person commencement in May truly impossible to achieve under current health guidelines. At the same time, what we want to do is we want to celebrate your achievements. We want you to have that moment that is so special that signals the completion of a degree at Penn State University. We have a group, part of one of the task forces that Provost Jones has mentioned, that is focused on commencement activities. And they're proposing a two-phase option. The first phase of that is to do something virtually, where literally we are awarding the degrees with the typical pageantry of a commencement, but names going up on the screen. But that doesn't really solve the issue that you want to really be together with your students, to have that moment of sharing, to have that moment where you're looking around your Penn State campus and feeling those feelings about what it has meant to be here for a degree. So we're working on a second phase, yet to be defined because it depends on the evolution of this pandemic, in which we truly can come together on our campuses and celebrate your many achievements. So you will hear more details about that, but a two-phase effort, one granting your degree, and the second a celebration of your success with your fellow students.
Thank you. We've had many people write to us and say that they would be willing to wait and come back months down the line. It sounds like you're really listening to the community here.
Absolutely. I think everyone who has spoken to me about it has told me how important it is, even if it's postponed, to be able to gather, to be able to see your friends face to face, to be able to look at the buildings and have that moment of celebration, which is the capstone for a Penn State degree. So we're working on it.
Provost Jones, would you like to add something?
Sure. I would just like to do a shout out to the parents who may be listening in and tell you that in addition to being the university's chief academic officer, I also have a little bit of skin in this game myself. My daughter is set to be a graduating senior, and our family, like many of yours, has been impacted by this rapid onset of coronavirus. And so I too am disappointed. My daughter is disappointed, and I can assure you that I and we are committed to ensuring the best possible experience for all of our graduating seniors. As the president said, this is something worth celebrating, and we're not going to miss that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Provost Jones, we'll stick with you for the next question. Another very frequent question that we've been getting is, has there been any decision made on the Faculty Senate resolution regarding the satisfactory, unsatisfactory switch to grading options?
Yes, there has, and I'm just going to say a few words, then I will pass off to Yvonne Godelius to maybe share the details. She's a bit closer to that and is more likely to get them exactly right than I am. But we had concerns as soon as this hit about the challenges it presented for our learning environment, and in particular, how with the rapid adaptation our students had to endure, that perhaps their performance might not be quite what they would have liked it to be should things have continued as normal. So we were concerned. We knew that our faculty were concerned, as expressed through the Senate resolution, and we heard from you directly also and indirectly through your various representative student groups. So this was an issue that we took very seriously. We had a group formed that rolled up their sleeves and took a good hard look at this to come up with what I think is a very fair, reasonable, and accommodating solution. So students have some choice in how their grades are displayed, and it allows them also that flexibility that we talked about to not be negatively impacted by disruption to their traditional learning environment. So Yvonne, maybe I could reach out to you to give a short synopsis of what that is going to look like, and tomorrow I think we will be getting the details of this broadly distributed.
Yes, thanks very much, Provost Jones. I'm happy to try to provide that. One of the main goal of this shift in the grading scheme is to provide students with flexibility, recognizing that this has just been an exceptional and unusual time for students, and that through no fault of their own, students' learning has been disrupted by the need to go to remote. We also want to minimize the impact on critical factors like GPA and for transcripts, so that people are aware that this disruption was due to the uniqueness of the situation that we find ourselves in. Another important key element of our approach to this was placing the control in students' hands, knowing that some may want to retain their letter grades. So for example, if I've been earning an A all semester, I likely want to keep that A. Whereas for others who maybe their learning has been disrupted, or they've been having trouble, they've had to move back home, they don't perhaps have the same access to Wi-Fi, those types of things, we want to give those students more flexibility. So in brief, what we will be doing is faculty members will post the grades that students have earned students will have approximately a week, and we're still finalizing some of these details, but approximately a week after the grades are posted to determine whether or not they want to retain the letter grade that they've earned in the class, or whether they want to switch that to one of 3 grades. The 3 grades are a satisfactory grade, which will require, if a student's earned a C or better in the course, they can choose satisfactory instead of the letter grade. If they've earned a D, they could choose what will be a passing grade. This course will earn credit. It can be used to meet requirements where D is an acceptable grade. Or if they were not able to pass the course, they can choose a special no grade designation, which will indicate that it was because of these situations. As I said, these will still count towards meeting things like general education requirements. They still will count towards semester standing. So I know one of the questions we did get was the impact on the football ticket process. These credits will still be credits earned and will still count towards that. They also do count as satisfactory process for the financial aid satisfactory process for financial aid processes. So all of that will be retained. And as Provost Jones said, more to come on that within the next few days, much more detail.
I think you wanted to add one more thing?
Just to clarify, students will have a choice of keeping the D or replacing it with a grade of V, or in place of a grade of F, they can elect to have the grade Z. And there'll be a notation on all transcripts indicating what these grades mean. No harm, no fault. And I think everybody will recognize the peculiar circumstances associated with this spring 2020 semester.
Yvonne, I'll follow up with you on a question, and we'll fully acknowledge that some of these details are still being ironed out. So if you say that we'll answer that soon, we understand. But how will this affect students getting into specific programs or majors that might have specific requirements there?
Thanks, Ben. It's a good question. And some of that detail we are still working out on a major by major basis, depending on what the requirements for those majors are. But our general principle is, again, to try to allow students flexibility wherever possible. The associate deans and all of the academic programs are working hard on these questions, and we should have more detail on that by the end of this week.
And again, just to follow up, so that we're completely clear with our audience, does this apply to graduate students, undergraduate? Does this apply to World Campus students?
Yeah, great clarification. This applies to all undergraduate students, no matter where they are studying. So at any of our campuses, undergraduate students, our World Campus undergraduate students, students who had to return from study abroad because of these disruptive circumstances will also have this option. It currently does not apply to graduate students, although the graduate school is working on this as we speak, and more guidance from them will be coming within the next few days.
Thank you so much for those detailed answers. As I said before, we will be posting the latest developments on this story and everything that discussed today on the virus sites. We will move on to our next question, and this one is for Damon Sims. I know that there has been some communication out already, but there's still some confusion as to when students will be allowed back onto campus to collect belongings from their dorm rooms.
Thank you, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone. I think it's wonderful to be able to connect with our community in this way in this difficult time. You know, with all these complicated issues, there are some very practical matters that students and others are wondering about. And one that came up early on really was this question of what do I do with my belongings in the residence halls? This is an example where our colleagues worked very hard to put together a comprehensive plan that would have worked extremely well, I think, but for ever-changing circumstances. And this has been a situation where the circumstances do seem to change day to day, if not hour to hour. We got to a place where we were about to launch this plan and realized that we couldn't do so because the governor's restrictions became more stringent, and mobility of people was not what it was, and the ability of people to gather in groups wasn't what it would have to be in order for that many people to move out of the residence halls all at once. So the belongings remain in the residence halls, and as circumstances change, and we get to a place in the future where people can come back to retrieve them, they'll be able to do so. It's important, though, to know that there are exceptions to every rule, it seems. And in this situation, we have some folks who have belongings that are more important, perhaps, than others. Some instances, for instance, students have left pharmaceuticals that are very important to their welfare and their rooms. And we have other examples like that. So students who want to have an exception should reach out to housing or residence life and talk about their situation. And our colleagues in those units will work with students to make sure that some sort of accommodation is reached for them. We want to do the best we can for students in every instance, and wherever a need exists that we can address, we shall.
Thank you very much. One thing, since Penn State draws in people from all over the country and world, we've been asked specifically, is there going to be a mechanism for people who can't easily come get their things when it is time to come and pick up those belongings?
Well, that's a good question too, of course, and there are those folks, not only international students, but students across the country and students with other situations that don't allow them to come to campus. We will work with them. There happens to be a service called Storage Squad that will pack up belongings and ship them to wherever they need to be. And we will work with students and Storage Squad to make those accommodations. So again, residence life and housing are the staffs that are directly involved with this and would work with any student now or at the time necessary to address this need in the way that it presents for a student.
Thank you very much. Dr. Barron, we have another question for you. Again, a very popular question that we received, and it's multi-part. Will there be any reimbursements or credits for dorms, housing, student fees, or actual tuition? Can you explain how that works?
I certainly can. So first, we know that you're not using the end of your housing contract and not using those food service elements and food plan elements. And so the university has made the decision to refund on a prorated basis those dollars back to students and their families. So we thought about a lot of different options. The simplest and most direct is to return the dollars to you. We have no plans to refund tuition. Part of the reason is that we're working very hard to make sure that you get those credits and you have the learning outcomes that you need. And our faculty, for which your tuition dollars are paying, are hard at work to do that. And I don't want this to sound like that this is the most overriding factor, but in fact, it is actually costing the university more to be moving to remote because of the services that we have to purchase and some of the other things that we have to do in order to deliver a remote education. So unfortunately, this transition is expensive for the university. Fees are also challenging as a topic because many of the student fees voted on by the student fee board or from the past cover things like the equivalent of the mortgage on buildings like a rec center. And so what that means is that those payments still have to be made. And so in fact, very little of this would be associated with something that is functional. So because we still have to support those expenses, we plan to continue to do so because that's what the fees are about. And we would not want to take a tuition dollar to pay for something that was not an educational activity. So pretty much we're trapped within that mode of covering those expenses with fees. Now, Damon may have something to add there about the fees. I don't know.
I think you said it very well, President Barron. In addition to things like rec centers, there are these services that remain critically important, of course, that we have to sustain. Counseling and psychological services would be perhaps top of mind, but student legal services and others that students continue to access. And we're determined to, just as the provost and others have stood up the academic side of the experience that students have in a remote environment, we're determined to do that as richly as we can with the other part of the student experience outside the classroom. And many of the services and programs that are supported by the student-initiated fee are the kinds of things that we have to continue in this environment if students are going to be as successful as we want them to be.
Thank you all. And Dr. Barron, if we could just clarify, when you say that money will be returned directly to them, how does that work? Do they need to apply for this? Does this money just go back? How does that work?
Okay, I don't actually know the functionality, but I'm assuming that they would not have to apply to do it. That we will look at those housing and food contracts, and we will return the dollars to the students and families.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to another question that is financially related that has really been asked a lot of our department. And this one is for you, Damon Sims. Again, is there anything the university can do to reach out to off-campus landlords, recognizing that we can't tell a private industry what to do with their money and their property, but can the university work with the community landlords to help students with rent or leases?
Well, again, being reminded of the president's three fundamentals in all this and our concern about the financial well-being of everyone, importantly our students, we have been mindful of this concern. You're right, Ben. These are private contractual relationships, of course. Payments are not made to the university, and so it's hard for us to directly interfere with that. But we have established a strong relationship with the local landlords. We were working with them actually on a move-out arrangement for off-campus housing, and they've been good collaborators with us. We have open communications with them. We're trying to communicate to them the need for some sensitivity where it's appropriate with regard to these issues related to finances for students, and we'd like for them to consider avoiding unnecessary fees, late fees, other kinds of fees that could be charged to students related to their lease arrangements. I should say that where a student is absolutely unable to meet this need in some way, I think we're having conversations about other things we can do perhaps to relieve certain aspects of the burden through our student emergency fund. But that has limited resources too, and there are a lot of needs that have to be addressed. So in the end, I think that it's important for us to hear from students, perhaps through the student legal service, where they can give some advice about what the lease allows and doesn't allow. But there are limitations in terms of what we can do to interfere with that relationship, or trying to partner with landlords to see that accommodations that are appropriate will be met.
Thank you. Renata Engel, we have a question for you now. And what is being done for students with practical labs, real hands-on environment where online instruction just isn't the same as being in the actual classroom and holding something in your hands?
Sure. It's a great question. Of course, our faculty work very hard with each other and with a cadre of instructional designers to uphold what those learning outcomes are for laboratory courses. We know that's an important element of the education, and so while it may have to be adjusted in these times, those learning outcomes are still a major driver for the decisions that the faculty are making in order to accommodate what that learning experience will be. I'll give you a few examples just to illustrate the things they're doing. So in some cases, for complex scientific experiments, there might be case studies that would replace that sort of investigation. Where data can be collected, it could be done through simulations, or it may be done by the faculty member. And then that data is shared with the students, who then would conduct the analysis, test the hypothesis, if you will. We have other types of laboratories, of course, that are underway. So you might have some specialized design projects that would require use of special computer software. And in those cases, faculty are making arrangements for students to be able to remote access into some of those computers. And therefore, they're able to actually continue to do the work as though they were in that laboratory. or some laboratories and some computers are not easily accessible. Robotics labs are a good example. A student may not be able to remotely test something on a robotic instrument. But in these cases, faculty might be accepting the student's work, the program. They would run that robotic arm or that robotic device, record it, share that back with the student, and then give the student the opportunity to both refine what they're doing and perhaps resubmit. So this gives you an example of the range of kinds of things that faculty are thinking about. And the reason why they're able to do that is, again, because they're thinking about the learning objectives that they're trying to have the students achieve. And they're working with themselves, with each other, and they're working with instructional designers. There's a cadre of instructional designers at Penn State that are able to help the faculty also think about different approaches to accomplish those learning outcomes.
Thank you very much. Yvonne, we have a question for you now, and specifically, how will final exams be administered? What kind of process are we looking for as students are preparing for finals, and then maybe final projects that require a capstone or a portfolio, something beyond a traditional test or essay?
Thanks. Our current plan is that final exams for undergraduate and graduate students will be administered as scheduled. And there's a couple of important reasons for doing this. One is we want to make sure we avoid conflicts if faculty were otherwise independently moving the time of their exam. We also want to follow policies around the amount of the weight of exams that can occur during the last week of classes, and make sure that students don't have too many exams on the same day. Your faculty members will be reaching out to you about how your exam may change. The shift to extend to remote for the rest of the semester has only just happened, and faculty are now just starting to turn their attention to final exams, capstone, portfolio projects. However, as was mentioned earlier, one of the things our faculty members are committed to are finding ways to remotely assess the learning that's taken place in the classroom and how to determine whether or not you've met those learning objectives. If you have questions about your final exam, and your faculty member will be notifying you, but if you do have questions about your final exam or how the evaluation is going to take place, your first step should be to speak with your instructor.
Thank you. I understand, Provost Jones, you would like to say something as well?
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in, and this is probably particularly for the parents who are listening. You heard both Renata and Yvonne talk repeatedly about learning objectives. These describe what we try to achieve in a course. They are agreed upon ahead of time, and all courses are focused on achieving those learning outcomes or learning objectives. There's more than one way to achieve learning objectives, and I think what we are finding as a university, and actually it's very heartening, is we see our faculty really going above and beyond and to extraordinary lengths to come up with different and innovative ways of achieving those learning objectives. Maybe not what they had originally thought of back at the beginning of the semester, but they are pivoting really in a remarkable manner to ensure that all of our students are meeting those learning objectives, even though the path may be slightly different from the original path.
Thank you. Matt Ferrari, we have some questions regarding the science behind the coronavirus, and specifically, how long does a person remain contagious after they have first contracted that virus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are two things that happen. First, there's a period of what we call latency, where the virus, you contact the virus and it begins to start replicating in your body. That's a period that oftentimes is asymptomatic and may last for up to 5 or 6 days. Towards the end of that period, it is possible that you may be transmissible. You may be able to infect somebody else, even though you haven't started to experience symptoms yet. After that period of time, you might start to experience symptoms, things like a dry cough and fever and tiredness, things like that. And those symptoms may progress to become more severe, or they may maintain at a relatively low level. That period we might expect to last about 14 days. Right? Now, that's an average. There are some people that will progress through that faster and other people that will progress through that slower. So you want to stay in touch with your health provider throughout that period, ideally through telemedicine or internet, to try and minimize your the potential risk that you might pose to other members of the community, and really only seek additional care outside of the home in the event that your symptoms worsen through that time. But there has been some, we're now gaining additional evidence through review of individual patients and sampling of virus from individual patients over time. And we're seeing a strong indication that someone, from the time that symptoms begin to the last point where we can recover infectious virus, is somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 14 days. Again, it's going to differ for every single person out there, but that gives us an average on which we can base general recommendations for self-quarantine.
If I could build off of that, when you say that it varies from person to person, is there anything a person can do to shorten that duration? And beyond that, what other best practices can you offer specifically for students?
There's really nothing that an individual can do to shorten the duration of their own infectiousness. I mean, that's the realm of medicine and therapeutics, and that's something that is rapidly developing here. And again, for the vast majority of people, upwards of 80% of people that are infected with this virus can expect to experience relatively mild infection that would be akin to something like the flu. Now, the flu can be pretty miserable when you experience it, but it's oftentimes not life-threatening in that case. And the best thing that an individual can do is prevent their ability to transmit to others during that time period. And so that's a period of self-isolation, trying to avoid interaction really with just about anybody else if you have the means to do so. And that's isolating yourself from your family members and roommates, et cetera, right? Again, that's a really unfortunate thing to suggest, but that's the best way we can prevent this thing from posing a risk to others.
Thank you. Specifically, Nick Jones, we have a question on how this new situation is going to affect graduate students, particularly related to thesis deadlines. Are there any efforts to give them extra time for this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we're all learning as we navigate this new landscape that has been thrust upon us is the need for us to try to follow our general principles, but also afford flexibility wherever it's necessary. And in some cases required. And I think this is a great example of where that is the case. Obviously, we have expectations for those theses that they meet certain requirements and levels of accomplishment. But giving our students just a little bit more flexibility, recognizing the fact that they're not engaging with the process in the same way that they did before spring break, really demands that we're just a little bit more flexible with timing and in the stringency of those requirements. So that's certainly something that we're looking to implement.
Thank you. And can you talk about any efforts that advisors and faculty members either are doing or can do to help keep those graduate students on track?
Sure. And I'll go back to the President Barron's comments in his introductory statement. The importance of maintaining connection, even though it's virtual and it's different, staying closely connected, students reaching out to their advisors on a regular basis, advisors reaching out and checking in with their students on a regular basis, maybe even a more regular basis than they would have done if the student and advisor were physically present at the same campus. I think really building and emphasizing the importance of that connectedness is critically important. So I encourage both students and advisors to work very hard on that.
Thank you. Renata Engel, we have another question for you. Can you explain, obviously we have a very robust World Campus system. Has that been an aid to us as we're switching to a more complete remote learning system? And are there any resources for faculty members who are looking to maybe up their game with their remote learning classes?
Sure, it's a great question. The World Campus, of course, has great visibility in the online space. This situation presented different challenges, I think, to the university. And what we recognized was that the years of World Campus and online education being provided at Penn State did a number of things. It built a cadre of people across the university that aren't maybe not working directly with World Campus, but actually are capabilities that we have grown over time. And this is very important because we actually have depth in places that are very important, have been tapped extensively. The other part is that there are lots of resources available just in general for faculty members to support their teaching efforts and to provide the best learning experiences for students. So I'm going to name a few of those that have been sort of at the core of the approaches that have been used here. The Schreier Institute for Teaching Excellence is certainly one of them. Another one is Teaching and Learning with Technology. And both of those units are central units for the university and have been done a remarkable job, I think, of pulling together a number of resources. So where has World Campus fit into this? There's been a number of things that we have done to assist. There have been different types of training and education that we have available to faculty for some of the particular aspects of online education. There are other things that we have been doing where some of the content might be able to be used that might have been online, fully an online course, and a faculty member may choose to use that to supplement or augment what they're teaching for a course that was designed originally to be residential and in that modality. So I think that the aspect that has been most important here has been revealed is the strength of Penn State in building really a wide breadth of resources that faculty can tap into. I would also say that those same units have been extraordinarily helpful in with regard to student support. And so they have been creating tips and ways that students can become more effective in the online learning space as well. So it's not just about the teaching side, it's also on the learning side. And again, I think what we're seeing is a breadth of the university, the resources we have, and the collection of people that are willing to work shoulder to shoulder to help students be able to complete the semester successfully.
Thank you very much. Damon, we have a follow-up for you. We had someone reach out to us. We had discussed how students that live on campus, or at least some steps that are going into them coming back to get their things. But what about the students who live off campus? Is there any kind of process that they should be following with their respective landlords, or any recommendations you can give?
Well, one thing that they generally can keep in mind, Ben, is that most leases for off-campus residences extend beyond the end of the semester. So they have some more time, perhaps, than others would. They can work with their individual landlords to see what accommodations can be made that they can access, for the time being at least, they can access those things in those communities that are not under some sort of lockdown and people are still able to move about. If you get to the end of a lease term and you can't access your belongings before that or make some arrangement to secure them otherwise, landlords, I believe, have to give you 10 days notice before they move them out of the accommodation. And they have to store those belongings at their own expense, so that extends that period a little bit. And then if for whatever reason a student might need to maintain those belongings in storage for a while before they could retrieve them, they can be sustained in that arrangement, but at the student's expense at that point. But I'd say that this is another example where I'm sure there are extraordinary circumstances and extraordinary needs. It's harder for us, of course, to be involved in accessing private residences off campus. But where there are those extraordinary needs, I would encourage any student to reach out to student care and advocacy or other offices in student affairs, certainly my office, to let us know what that situation is and see what we could do to work with the local landlord to address that need. And if you're on another campus, we certainly have colleagues in those locations who might be able to help us in the same way.
Thank you. Dr. Barron, we have another question for you, and this was addressed in the earlier town hall that was focused for faculty and staff, but we do have some students that do some work for us as well. Can you tell us what the outlook is for students with like work studies to be paid?
So we have made the decision, a commitment to all employees, and that's whether they're faculty, staff, or students, that we will continue the salaries for employment until at least the end of April. So this includes hourly wage workers. Of course, if they're not full-time, we have to work out that particular component. We are committed to ensuring that the work-study students also have this as a benefit. And this is very important, that the university pay the portion of it so that it releases the federal or state funds that are associated with work-study. So we have that as a full commitment regardless of what your employment type is for Penn State. Now, what happens after April 30th? Why are we doing this, and why have we set a particular time period? It's not because we think there'll be some abrupt cliff on April 30th. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we have the time to be thoughtful and strategic and minimize any financial impact, particularly for those for which that job is incredibly important. So I'll give you some examples of why it is we want that time to be thoughtful and to be strategic and to have this goal of minimizing the impact. So one example is that the U.S. Congress is considering and hopefully on the verge of passing an extensive stimulus bill that provides additional relief. That may be relief for the institution. It may be relief for parts of the institution. There are a number of categories of relief for students and indications that some of the rules and regulations that might stop a student from having that income may be relaxed. And so that's an area for which getting that information is very important before it is that we make a decision. And of course, the longer that this pandemic goes with the consequences on delivery of education, the more challenging it becomes for the university financially. And so eventually, if it were to continue, we would have to think carefully through how it is that we manage that financial problem. But our commitment is clear. No abrupt changes in the salaries for our employees, and that means all employees.
Thank you for the clarification, Dr. Barron. Nick Jones, we have one for you. And this was specifically about refunds for students who had to end their study abroad programs early. Obviously, we had to bring many students back because of situations in other countries. Will there be a refund for these students?
Yeah, there's two parts to answering that question. The first is working with the Office of Global Programs, who are responsible for all of our study abroad programs. We're doing our very best to hold students and families harmless for any additional expenses that they incurred associated with having to exit their study abroad experiences early. So that piece we have covered. On the course delivery side, Global Programs has also worked very hard with providers. We normally, in many of these countries, have a partner who helps us provide the interface to the educational institutions where our students are studying. And those providers have worked very hard with us in almost every instance to ensure that the students can continue their experience even though they've returned home here to the United States. And so while the sort of experiential aspect has been lost, certainly the academic component of this is being sustained. So that piece, there I am sure are a few instances where that could not be maintained, and we would certainly work with students to help them obtain a refund in those instances. But by and large, the providers have really stepped up to ensure that our students can complete their experience in remote format.
Thank you very much. Damon Sims, we have a question for you specifically regarding Lyon Cash, and will it still be accessible to students next year? And what about students who are graduating?
Yes, Ben. Lyon Cash has always worked in a way that allows the balances to roll over from semester to semester, year to year. And so that's going to be the case again. If you happen to be graduating or otherwise leaving university, you can go to the Lyon Cash website, and there's a form there that you can fill out to seek a refund. So it's a relatively simple process, and it hasn't changed at all from what it's been for quite some time.
We like simple answers, right? Yvonne, we have a question for you. What is going to happen for students, and what kind of accommodations can be made for people who need a certain number of observations? I'm thinking maybe of our people studying to be teachers where they have to be in a classroom that no longer exists in the state of Pennsylvania, or some other observation where the social distancing is prohibiting that. What can be done for these students?
Thanks. This is a really important question. One of the challenges with answering this question is that a lot of these requirements are determined by a variety of accreditation and governmental agencies. We don't have all of the answers on this because many of those agencies are also struggling with how to accommodate these requirements. But we are working hard via the academic colleges and programs, and offices such as governmental affairs are also advocating with the relevant agencies to determine how best to help students achieve these hours. As President Barron said at the beginning of this conversation, one of our goals is to help students be able to complete their semester. So we're seeing some very, very creative approaches in these conversations, and we will continue to work with these agencies to try to come up with the best resolutions possible.
Thank you very much. Dr. Barron, I think you wanted to add something?
Sure. I wanted to make sure people knew that we're actually in frequent contact with Pennsylvania Department of Education and other areas. So just to give you a couple of examples, I am on a weekly call with the Pennsylvania Department of Education for this very reason, to make sure that there's an understanding of where it is that some of these changes would trip up a student. And so there's a lot of clarity and discussion on the best ways for us to manage this. So we're strongly, we're acting as strong advocates for our students and for their success. There are other examples as well that may or may not have been noticed. For example, with FIA, to make sure that students that are learning remotely are not penalized in terms of what their FIA aid is like. And so again, working closely with other universities and FIA, we've made sure that we could protect what is millions of dollars of funding for students, to make sure that it's not lost as we move to this new environment.
Thank you very much. Renata Engel, we have a question for you, and it's something that a lot of people in Pennsylvania, particularly rural Pennsylvania, are dealing with. But what can be done to help students who might be living in these areas where there's not great internet? What can be done to help them really succeed with remote learning?
Sure, it's a great question. And we began looking at this very early when we knew we had to make this decision. There are, of course, a number of options, and so we are pursuing several paths here. Let me begin by saying one of the areas is that we are looking at the deployment of mobile hotspots in those areas where the internet connection may be spotty. We are really grateful to the internet providers who have stepped up and expanded resources and access to various parts of Pennsylvania, really the rest of the country. So that has also, I think, helped in many ways. But let me take a moment here also to talk briefly about how we're doing this. First of all, we need to know who doesn't have good access. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're using, on the back end of our systems, we're looking at over those first couple of days. Remember, we've only been in this for a week now, but we looked at the data over the first couple of days to say who didn't connect with their courses. And we compiled those lists, and academic advisors are reaching out by phone to many of those students, to actually each of those students, whenever they understand what the situation is, to learn more about what the particular circumstance is for that learner, and to see what it is that we might be able to help them in terms of addressing the ability to access the internet, to access their content. for their courses. So that step is really an important one. I think if people are still having difficulty connecting, if students have a difficult time connecting, please use the resources that we have. Of course, on our website, there is information. Let me give you the place to look. There is the IT service desk at psu.edu. But we also recognize that you might not be able to access that. So there is a phone number, and that phone number is 814-865-4357. 814-865-4357. And by reaching that number, what you are reaching is a group of individuals who are on the technology side who will first answer will find out a lot of information about your particular circumstance, and then get you connected to the resource that actually could be the most helpful to you in the circumstance that you have. So there's a lot of individual reach out that's happening now. And we're also trying to make sure that as students, we progress through the next several weeks, that we're making sure that those connections for students are made available. It's an important question and one that we are very mindful of, and know that we will continue to work this issue as the days progress into the situation that we're in. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Yvonne, we have a question for you, and I know there's been some guidance from the university on why it's important for professors to continue holding their lectures at a specific time. Can you address for us why that is, especially considering some people might be in different time zones than they were when they were attending in person?
Yes, I'm happy to chat about that. I think we heard President Barron and Provost Jones both give very compelling stories about this. I think President Barron's experience that he had with his class last week, where the ability to bring people together and see each other and connect with each other and form that learning community and the vitality of that learning community and how that can help sustain us so that people don't get lost if all structure disappears. So that's one of the really big reasons why we're doing this, is understanding that that structure is important. At the same time, we do recognize, of course, that individual students are going to have circumstances that are going to make this just very difficult for them. So we encourage those students to reach out to their faculty member, explain the situation, because we do all have the goal too of trying to provide students with the flexibility they need to be successful in their coursework. I know that some faculty members are recording their lectures so that students can watch them at a later time. That might not be possible in all cases, but there might be other strategies that students can use to get to that material. And the other thing I think we want to encourage is that it is very helpful as students try to successfully complete their semester to still have a structure, to still have a schedule. If all schedule disappears, we know that it can be challenging to stay connected, to stay on top of the work. So we do want to do this to combat feelings of isolation, stress, and anxiety for students. And again, though, if you do have a particular challenge, I very much would encourage you to reach out to your faculty member and work with that faculty member to come up with a solution.
Thank you very much. Dr. Barron, I understand you wanted to add something to that?
Well, Yvonne gave an excellent assessment of why this is important. And it's important to realize that those thoughts are backed up by a considerable amount of data that an engaged student that is participating is a more successful student, is more likely to finish. But I also want to call attention to the fact that one of the things that really differentiates Penn State is this sense of community, this we are element. And this, in a time that is very stressful with many, many things changing, this is an opportunity to promote and keep that sense of community. It literally has a profound impact on people's well-being and on their success.
Thank you very much. Nick Jones, this next question is for you. We've had several graduate students reach out to us, and similar to faculty members, they're concerned about ongoing hands-on research and what is being done to keep the research engine going.
Yes, this has been something that we've been thinking about for some weeks now. Last Friday, our Senior Vice President for Research, Laura Weiss, circulated guidance to all faculty about what our guidance would be moving forward in terms of maintaining the research enterprise. Unfortunately, we have had to scale back access to some of our laboratories and other research facilities. That said, we are doing everything we can to ensure that certainly at a minimum essential research continues, and Penn State does a lot of essential research, and that there is access provided to both faculty and graduate students to maintain that activity. The definition of what essential is both simple and complex, but we are making every effort to support graduate students in accessing things that are critical to their making forward progress towards their degree. We had a good example just a few days ago where we had one particular graduate student who was in the middle of some experiments that if they had been terminated and access limited, it would have delayed completion of them, which would have delayed completion of her dissertation, which would have delayed completion or her ability to continue with employment after graduation. And so we made the appropriate accommodations to ensure that student could have access to her laboratory, and we're happy to do that. This is really a priority for this institution.
Provost, if I could just follow up on that question. If someone does feel that they're at that critical juncture of their research and it literally has to be observed in person or something, what process do they go to? Do they contact your office? How should they go about this?
Well, not right away. They should first contact their dissertation advisor. Their advisor can elevate that as necessary to the department head. The department head will go to the dean, and if necessary, the dean will eventually find his or her way to me. But in many cases, these types of requests can be processed most effectively locally, and we have great academic leadership distributed across this institution who are capable of using the very best judgment and making the right calls in these circumstances.
Thank you very much. Damon, we have another question for you. And obviously for many people, this is a very stressful time, whether that's dealing with just the ongoing news about the coronavirus. Every day we hear new numbers coming out, or if people are just feeling stressed about learning in this new environment. The question is CAPS still available, and what can be done? Is there an online resource? Are people available by telephone? What can be done for students who are feeling stressed by this new world?
Yes, Ben, this all hands on deck theme that we're hearing again and again is across the university. It's just been remarkable and heartening, as the provost says, to see people throw themselves into transitioning to a remote environment as quickly and as well as we have. I think one of the areas of deepest concern we have had is in the area of counseling and psychological services, because we understand, as you say, that this is a particularly stressful time for everyone and for no one more than it is for our students. We want to make sure that the services that are so able to support them in normal circumstances are able to do so through these extraordinary circumstances. And this is one of those examples, I think, where you don't quite know fully what the benefit's going to be of something really good you do. And over the last few years, largely through student advocacy, we've been able to expand counseling and psychological services. And importantly, we've added a lot of remote services to what CAPS has to offer. And so those things are really coming in handy now when we're living in this remote environment. But I should tell you that the bottom line for counseling and psychological services is they're open for business. If you call 814-863-0395, you'll get somebody to answer your call and direct you to the help you need. They are setting up appointments for individual counseling sessions that way. So we're fully remote, we're fully in business, we're fully attending to these issues. as we always are. But I think tapping into those online resources like WellTrack, for instance, which you'll find at the CAPS website, which allows you to sort of self-assess and self-help with regard to anxiety and depression. You'll get a lot of help 24/7 from our services that way, but connecting to individuals who can talk to you is something that we're continuing. And that is true at all locations. Now that we are remote, we can help students at all locations. So I'm really pleased, so proud of my colleagues for throwing in their full energy and talent to make that possible, and students should take full advantage of it as they can.
Thank you, and we will make sure that we put the phone numbers and links to those resources on the virus sites that we keep mentioning. That is linked on this liveevents.psu.edu page. Matt, we have another question regarding the science for you. Thank you so much for being here with us and being on hand to answer these questions that are really only can be answered by an epidemiologist like yourself. This person is asking if it's possible that they could transmit the virus, or a theoretical person could transmit the virus if they are not showing any symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, I think what we've seen, both the good and the challenging story about this virus, is that the majority of people will have a mild or asymptomatic infection. And so the best practice really is to presume that you're already infectious and you're already have the potential to spread the virus to others. And then to take on behaviors such as hygiene and physical distancing, minimizing your contact with other people, minimizing the amount of time you spend out in high traffic and social areas. Take on those behaviors as though you were already putting the community at risk in that sense. Again, that's taking on quite a bit of burden for every individual, but it's part of the community's response that's necessary in this moment. Right? At present, before we have drugs and therapeutics that we hopefully will have several months down the road, these behavioral interactions and these behavioral interventions are the best tools we have at present to slow the spread of this outbreak and minimize the burden on our health systems, to buy ourselves time to prepare to take care of the ill as those numbers continue to rise.
Thank you. Damon, we have another question for you. Is there anything that the university can do or is doing to help international students who are facing a rather daunting reality of their visas expiring because of what's going on in the country right now?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One, I'd say that our colleagues in global programs have just been really extraordinary too. I mean, I could give kudos to everybody at the university for the way they've pitched in, but global programs in the early stages of this experience were working round the clock to address these issues, and they're very sophisticated about these concerns, and that would be the first place to go, I think, for assistance. I would add that student legal services, understanding that visa issues and immigration issues in particular could arise. They have some good experience in the past dealing with those issues, but they've really become more acquainted with those issues in recent weeks themselves, boning up as they need to. And I think immigration courts remain open for business, and so that's another place to go depending on the nature of the problem that you have. But I think we're resourced pretty well through global programs for students to reach out and get the assistance that they need.
Thank you very much. Nick Jones, we have another question for you. Is faculty advising still continuing during this period? I could certainly see students might even be needing more of that right now.
Yes, absolutely. Advising is a critical piece of the student experience, and particularly the student academic experience. And it's probably fair to say that advising has never been more important than it is during this particularly challenging period. So students should absolutely be in contact with their advisors. I know most of our advisors are making efforts to reach out to their students. And so please make that contact and have the conversations that you need to have and get the guidance that you need. If you're having any challenges in reaching your advisor for some reason and you're a student, please reach out to David Smith in the Division of Undergraduate Studies or email dus@psu.edu. They stand ready to help, and the full resources of DUS will be at your disposal to help get you connected to your advisor, or if your advisor is not reachable, to somebody who can provide you with the guidance that you need.
Thanks. And if I could build off that just a little bit, it might be for Yvonne to answer this one, but are there any online tutoring services available, or anyone who might just need help studying or adjusting to this new learning environment?
Yes, absolutely. We want to ensure, just as we're ensuring with things like CAPS, that students still have access to the same range of services that they have were they here in face-to-face instruction, to make sure that things like Penn State Learning and the learning centers at our other campuses are equipped to do things like online study groups for students and run their tutoring sessions remotely. I also want to remind students that one of your really important resources in this area are the faculty members who are teaching you. And our faculty members are holding remote office hours. So set up a time to chat with those faculty members during those office hours and get the help that you need.
Thank you. Dr. Barron, we have another question for you that came in. Can you talk to us a little bit about the support that's available for students in this trying time? I know you mentioned the newly launched Student Care and Advocacy Emergency Fund. What can you tell us about that?
So we know that a large number of students are experiencing some level of financial stress. And so there has been a student emergency fund, but clearly the amount of funding there is inadequate when faced with a crisis like a pandemic and the degree of disruption that our students and families are experiencing. So we began the process of fundraising for the emergency fund. As of this morning, the last time I looked, more than 1,200 individuals have given over $100,000 to put funds there so that students with great need can access it. And this is now part of a deliberate fundraising strategy for the university. These are dollars that basically go straight into a fund and straight to students. We're going to do our best to populate that with more and more funds, so that if you're really under duress, you have an opportunity to get help.
Thank you very much. Damon, is there anything you'd like to add to that response?
Well, I think President Barron said it very well. Fundamentally, this is a fund that has existed for a considerable time and is managed by our Student Care and Advocacy Office and Student Affairs to address those extraordinary circumstances the students too often face, and certainly in this situation will be faced with. We've already received several hundred applications for assistance. The office typically has 3 staff members who are busy responding to these kinds of issues. We've augmented that supply of folks to respond with 8 more staff members from Student Affairs who've been redeployed to respond to calls. Part of this is working through the situation to understand it with more particularity in each instance and see if there's some way, of course, to resolve the situation without having to dip into the limited resources of the fund. Sometimes that's possible, or at least we can limit the amount of cash that's needed. But in every instance, the office is there to address students' needs, and some of those are financial. And I am so grateful to the president and our colleagues in development and in strategic communications for pushing out the message about the availability of this fund. And I would encourage anyone who understands the gravity of the financial situation that we face and that our students and their families face to be generous and offer support if you possibly can. I think it's never been more important than now.
I'd just like to take a moment to say that we will be archiving these town halls so that you can watch them in their entirety in case you missed a section or you came in a little late. We'll also be working to provide written responses that have been presented here today. for the same reasons. We do have several questions that are looking ahead a little bit, and I wanted to save some time for those here. What can you tell us about summer sessions or even looking out as further to the fall? Dr. Barron, we'll start with you. Okay,
so I think it's important that Provost Jones and I both answer this question from his viewpoint on summer session. Clearly, there are a lot of questions about how it is that this will evolve, and in many ways it is interesting to think that what will happen actually depends on the behavior of the population of this state and nation in terms of how they deploy social distancing and good hygiene, because that is what is going to tell us just how long this will last and how challenging it will be in terms of the health enterprise and the gathering of folks. We do have a group. It is entirely focused strategically on the university that I chair in partnership with the task forces that Provost Jones had described, which is tactically handling issues as they arise so that we can look at the different areas of revenue, the different areas of savings, the different actions that we can take as we move forward so that we can do it as efficiently and effectively as possible, always with that same overriding principle, which is health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff, making sure that we're living our mission of giving you that education that you need, and maintaining that focus on the financial security of the Penn State family. So we're working through all of these things, but it is truly something that is changing very rapidly, and so part of this is just one step at a time, and part of that one step at a time is what is being thought through for summer session.
Provost, I believe you're now required to respond to that as well.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Yes, I would just add that our faculty, staff, leadership across the institution are all working, thinking about the future with I think, a general operating principle, which is hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And so in most instances, as we think forward to the summer, as early as the Maymester, followed by the summer sessions, and then thinking off into the fall, everybody is thinking about what is the regular plan, but what is plan B? And how can we adapt what our normal way of doing business would be to reflect the new reality in which we're all living. So everybody across the institution is giving a great deal of thought to both modes of operation, ready to pivot at a moment's notice if things take a turn for the better, and we're able to begin to re-engage people. We are ready to do that, but also planning for the need for remote instruction and remote interaction, telecommuting for our faculty and staff to continue further. So we're sort of trying to cover both of our bases there in order to fulfill the priorities that the President articulated.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, perhaps for Yvonne, what plans are being made regarding LEAP and new student orientation?
That's a great question. And obviously both LEAP and new student orientation are critical experiences for our incoming students. As both the President and Provost have indicated, we're in two modes of planning. One, being hopeful that we can return to face-to-face teaching and orientation programs this summer, but also having a robust plan B in case we're not able to do that. I think one of the other things that you've heard through this conversation is that we're very fortunate that we have the excellence and expertise on the World Campus that has for years now been doing orientation to online students around the world and developing a robust suite of course offerings. So we're working very hard on this plan B to ensure that students are going to have a great experience. We want them to start college with a new student orientation that will help them be successful, that's going to help them meet other students, that's going to help them understand key resources of the university. And then if they need to transition into the LEAP program online, that will be a full range of courses that are going to give our incoming first-year students the opportunity to start their Penn State education. It won't be the same as it was face-to-face, but we're confident that we're going to develop a number of engagement opportunities, because again, we recognize that one of the things in the LEAP program that's so important is the opportunity to learn about the university, to make that transition from high school to college. And we're confident that we can do that online in a way that will still provide students with everything that they need.
Thank you. Obviously, this is a question that is going to be determined by the reality across the globe, but are there any thoughts at this point, Nick Jones, we'll look to you, but about the future of study abroad? Do we hope to return to that at some point, obviously taking into consideration everything that is going on in every other country?
Yes, absolutely. Penn State is a global institution. We embrace that, and we embrace the opportunity that we're able to provide to our students to have a global experience, be part of their educational program, if that is the right opportunity for them. We realize that this has created a big dislocation in that opportunity, but we remain committed to this and remain optimistic that in the not too distant future, we will return to a state where at any one moment in time, we will have Penn State students distributed across the globe, really benefiting from those interactions that they're having with folks in other countries. So the sooner we can get to that, the better, of course, but we're also mindful of the challenges that we currently face.
Dr. Barron, I'm sure a lot of people were very excited to learn that there were plans in place for an eventual traditional ceremony where people get to walk across the aisle in cap and gown and share that experience with their family and friends. But in the meantime, can you explain to us, will degrees still be conferred because people will then be looking to get jobs or apply for graduate school, things of that nature?
And you can count on that because, and after all, this is part of the thinking of this first phase virtual commencement and graduation, because for grad school, for that job, that Penn State credential is worth a great deal. And so we want to make sure that we award it as soon as it's earned.
Thank you. Yvonne, I have a follow-up question for you. Some people have asked a very practical concern. How will students return books they've rented or perhaps sell back textbooks they don't want, especially if they've rented those, they don't want to be causing other people problems?
Yes, and that is certainly an important question. Barnes & Noble is emailing all students who have rental textbooks. Barnes & Noble is our on-campus bookstore at all of our campus locations. The email is going to contain a prepaid UPS mailing label that will allow students to return rental books at no charge or no cost to the students. I know there were questions about opportunities to sell back textbooks at the bookstore, but as is the case with all buildings on campus and many buildings across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the bookstore is currently closed per order of Governor Wolf. So there will not be an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Damon, another practical concern. If a student was maybe able to clear out their room already and has since moved to remote learning back to their hometown, will they be allowed to mail in their keys without, especially if they're living on the other side of the country now?
They certainly may. They may do that immediately if they like. They can send their keys to Johnson Commons. It's room 133 in Johnson Commons, to the Common Desk Manager. The desk manager, I don't think, is being overwhelmed right now and would receive those keys happily as they can. So thank you for doing that.
Again, all of these specific individuals, phone numbers and websites, we will make sure these get on the virus site to make sure you have all of the resources that we've referenced, and just in case you weren't taking really good notes during this whole thing. Unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time, and so we did not get to all of the questions we received. I hope that you were Be patient with us as we continue to provide you with these answers, but we got to as many of them as we could and really tried to give importance to the questions that we received from multiple outlets. But Dr. Barron, I'd like to give you a moment for some final thoughts for our Penn State community and particularly our students.
So first of all, this is hard, and this pandemic is having a profound impact on our community. And it's not just hard in the fact that it's difficult, but it's changes swirling around us and uncertainty that we decide to do something one day and we get new guidance the next day that we have to change. All of that really adds an element of stress. I just want you to know that we really are working all hands on deck to make sure that we deliver what it is that you need in order to complete this semester, complete your degrees, and be ready for the rest of your education at Penn State. And I think what you heard is that all of those services that you're used to, they're still there. They're still there for advising or for career services or for CAPS. And they're there for you to take advantage of. But I urge you to think about that remote learning situation as what can I get out of it? Just as your faculty are sitting there saying, what do I need to do to make sure that my students are learning effectively? And I also encourage you to continue in that mode with that sense of community. The value of that sense of community for your well-being and for your success. And again, in so many ways, you're remarkable, what you have done and what you are doing and your patience and commitment as we go through this transition. So I want to make sure that I end by saying thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Barron, Nick Jones, Renata Engel, Damon Sims, Yvonne Gadelius, and Matt Ferrari for answering your questions today. I too want to thank the community for coming together in this unprecedented challenge facing us all. I'd like to echo my statements earlier today, but truly, if we all do our part to limit our social interaction, be vigilant with personal hygiene, and quarantining yourself if you feel sick, we can slow the spread of this novel coronavirus and flatten the curve. Please bookmark and continue to visit our website, psu.edu/virusinfo. It will have the latest information and updates from the university. We will also make sure we archive both of these town halls today in case you missed any part of it. Thank you all and have a good night.